In the golden glow of 1990s Halloween on the West Coast, a pillowcase full of candy was more than just a sugar haul. It was a cultural statement, a badge of social standing, and a personal highlight reel of one's trick-or-treating efficiency. Every October, the sidewalks of suburban California came alive with flashlight beams, the crunch of leaves under sneakers, and the soft rustle of plastic masks and capes. Neighborhoods from San Diego to Sacramento were transformed into orange and purple wonderlands, lit by flickering jack-o'-lanterns and draped in synthetic spiderwebs. Porches became stages, and driveways turned into candy-collecting battlegrounds. Kids roamed in packs, decked out in Power Rangers jumpsuits, Spice Girls outfits, and glow-in-the-dark skeleton pajamas from Target, with faces either painted or hidden behind drugstore masks that barely let them breathe. The mission? Score the best candy possible before bedtime. The stakes were unspoken but high. The right piece of candy could elevate your rep on the schoolyard the next morning. The wrong one could doom your entire haul to the junk pile, sometimes the literal bottom of the bag, sometimes donated to a parent's candy dish that no one actually touched. And while the rest of the country followed national candy trends, kids on the West Coast added their own spin to it all. Something about the year-round sunshine and ocean air made the whole ritual feel a little more laid back, but also a bit more creative. Instead of pumpkins carved with the usual triangle eyes and jagged mouths, California lawns sported jack-o'-lanterns with sunglasses or elaborate sculpted faces thanks to a wave of craft-crazy parents. Trick-or-treat routes were mapped with military precision. And those lucky enough to live in hilly areas with closely packed houses could clean up faster than a well-tuned Roomba. In the early part of the decade, Halloween candy was essentially a free-for-all. The selection was diverse, and everyone seemed to have their favorites. The big hitters were always in circulation. Mini Snickers, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Milky Ways, and Three Musketeers were the gold standard, the MVPs of Halloween loot. But West Coast kids, ever alert to the offbeat, also kept an eye out for the more unusual finds. Candy cigarettes still made the rounds in the early 90s, tucked inside tiny boxes that felt vaguely adult and taboo in the best way. No one really liked the taste, but the cool factor was undeniable, at least until parents started confiscating them mid-route. Airheads were a reigning champion. Those stretchy, neon-colored bars of vaguely fruit-flavored mystery had a cult following. And Tootsie Pops were solid currency, partly for the candy, but mostly for the challenge. How many licks would it really take to get to the center? There was also the less glamorous side of the haul, the Taffys, Chews, and suspiciously generic hard candies that kids accepted with a polite thank you and then forgot about instantly. Laffy Taffy and Now and Laters were common, and while some loved them, others winced at the dental risk they posed. You either had the jaw of a prize fighter or you knew better than to risk it. Most of these candies ended up being traded away in post-Halloween bartering sessions on school lunch tables or quietly discarded once the novelty wore off. Meanwhile, parents carried the residue of 1980s panic, still whispering warnings about razor blades and apples and strange people slipping drugs into pixie sticks. The legacy of those urban legends was a noticeable uptick in sealed, individually wrapped candies. Nothing homemade, nothing opened, and definitely no fresh fruit. Trust was replaced by tamper-proof wrappers and an uptick in Costco-sized bags of name-brand minis. By the early 90s, there was an unspoken rule in many neighborhoods. If it didn't come from a store and have a recognizable logo on it, it was going in the trash. Safety first, sugar second. By 1993, a new wave of candy had started making the rounds, and it was designed to hurt. Fruit Gushers and Warheads became the status candies of the schoolyard. Gushers were small, goo-filled time bombs that exploded in your mouth with a weirdly satisfying squish. But the real badge of honor was surviving a Warhead. These sour candies weren't just a flavor experience, they were a dare. Eating one without making a face earned you instant cred. Eating a handful at once, you were a legend. Kids on the West Coast embraced this pain-for-pleasure experience like it was an extreme sport, daring each other during recess and lunch to last the longest, without a sour-induced grimace. The craze swept through classrooms and Halloween buckets alike, and if you scored a few Warheads during trick-or-treating, you guarded them like treasure. Still, not everything in the bag was a win. Those dreaded peanut butter chews in orange and black wax paper were the bane of many a trick-or-treater. They were sticky, tasted vaguely like molasses and disappointment, and could easily remove a filling if you bit too hard. Yet, every Halloween, they appeared like clockwork. No one ever saw them in stores. No one knew where they came from. And yet, there they were, lurking in the bottom of every bag by November 1st. Kids gave them nicknames: cement shoes, granny glue, tooth traps, and used them as currency only when desperate. They were nearly impossible to trade, but the wrappers were somehow legendary. They had a vintage look, adorned with little bats, witches, or black cats, and they oozed old-school Halloween energy. For some, the wrapper alone was enough to forgive the candy's tragic taste. For others, it became instant ammunition for slingshots, pranks, or garbage day experiments. By the time the mid-1990s rolled around, the Halloween snack scene had taken a sharp turn into the strange and experimental. What had once been a predictable parade of chocolate minis and lollipops evolved into something wilder, louder, and much harder to explain to future generations. West Coast drugstores, particularly those tucked away in suburban strip malls or wedged between video rental shops and frozen yogurt counters, began to stock shelves with candy that looked like it came from a fever dream. Many of these treats were so obscure and fleeting that they've taken on a kind of mythic status among kids who grew up in that era. Some were believed to be exclusive regional releases, others maybe just one-season flukes, but either way, they stuck in the collective memory like a sour patch to the roof of your mouth. One of the most enduring of these mysterious treats was the infamous bug-shaped chocolate filled with neon green slime. No one quite remembers what they were called, where they came from, or why anyone thought sour apple goo inside a chocolate beetle was a good idea, but they were real enough to leave a sticky imprint on Halloween memories. Some swear it was a seasonal release from a Canadian brand. Others claim it was only sold at specialty stores around Los Angeles or up in the Pacific Northwest. The truth remains buried in discontinued product lines and old candy catalogs. Whether they were a momentary marketing stunt or a regional oddity, their weirdness made them unforgettable. Other treats had clearer names but still felt like relics from a stranger, sweeter time. BB Bat's Taffy on a Stick came in flavors like banana, chocolate, and strawberry, and were known to either delight or disappoint depending on the kid. Then there were Fruities, soft, chewy, and packed with flavor. While most flavors were popular, none carried the mystique of the vanilla Fruity. These pale blue candies were whispered about at school lunch tables and hoarded like treasure. If you had a handful of them, you were suddenly candy rich. The blue raspberry version came in a close second, always in high demand for post-trick-or-treat swaps. But the classic brown Tootsie Rolls, often left at the bottom of the bag or repurposed as trade filler, unless you had an old soul or an uncle with nostalgic taste. For the lucky few, Halloween meant scoring the ultimate prize, the full-size candy bar. These weren't just snacks, they were status symbols. On the West Coast, where suburban neighborhoods could stretch for miles, kids would map out their trick-or-treat routes around rumors of which houses were giving out full-size Snickers, Butterfingers, or even king-size packs of M&Ms. Usually, it was the dentist down the block trying to be ironic, a bored real estate agent making a good impression, or a low-key millionaire software developer tossing out sweets like confetti. Kids who found those houses kept the locations secret, sometimes even walking past them once before doubling back to hit them last. It was candy politics at its finest. Meanwhile, other candies sparked endless debates. Whoppers were either beloved malted miracles or dry, weirdly gritty disappointments. Fido-Honey and Mary Jane's occupied a strange gray area between retro charm and punishment. Some kids loved their sticky, nutty flavor, while others acted personally insulted to find them in their bags. Either way, they became part of the Halloween sorting ritual, the internal ranking system every kid had when laying out their stash on the living room floor. The lowest tier, without question, included items like toothbrushes, single pennies taped to index cards, boxes of raisins, or worse, a loose granola bar. These weren't just disappointing. They felt like a violation of the unspoken Halloween contract. And on the West Coast, where kids took their candy runs seriously, those houses were remembered, avoided, and sometimes TP'd for good measure. By 1996, sour was no longer just a flavor. It was a lifestyle. Crybaby gum had already made its name with 5 seconds of agony, followed by a burst of sweetness. Sour Punch straws were a lunchtime favorite year-round, but during Halloween, they became essential, especially if you could find the sour watermelon or blue raspberry flavors. Then there was toxic waste, a candy that dared kids to keep it in their mouths without spitting it out. That challenge became a rite of passage, especially in skate parks, schoolyards, and after-school hangouts from Long Beach to Sacramento. At the same time, candy stores and convenience marts in LA, San Diego, and parts of the Bay Area began carrying tubes of gooey, brightly colored candy slime. Sometimes it was marketed as alien slime, monster mucus, or galactic goo. The names changed, but the effect was the same. A disgustingly delightful mess of sour sugar you squeezed directly onto your tongue. This stuff wasn't just a treat, it was a performance. Kids would line up for matinees at local theaters or hang out on curbs during Halloween block parties, daring each other to down the whole tube in one go without making a face. And let's not forget the fringe snacks that only appeared around Halloween, but made an outsized impact. 3D Doritos, those strange puffed triangles of corn, started showing up at parties in shiny, futuristic bags. Alongside them were Orbit's drinks, those bizarre, semi-clear beverages with floating gelatin beads suspended inside like alien eggs. They weren't candy, strictly speaking, but they added to the surreal culinary landscape of West Coast Halloweens in the late 90s. As the 1990s came to a close, Halloween candy trends didn't just evolve, they fully collided with the era's obsession with branding, pop culture tie-ins, and over-the-top packaging. Suddenly, the treats in kids' bags weren't just tasty or sugary, they were full-blown entertainment products. Candy came dressed to impress. Pokemon-themed confections were everywhere, from lollipops shaped like Pikachu to candy dispensers that doubled as toys. Kids who had been trading Pokemon cards by day were now hoarding Pokemon candy by night. Rugrats-branded bubblegum showed up in plastic containers that looked like baby bottles or TV screens, a nod to Nickelodeon's dominance of Saturday mornings. Glow-in-the-dark wrappers added flair to even the most basic candy bars, turning your stash into a rave-ready snack pile. Halloween candy wasn't just candy anymore, it was merch. Companies dove headfirst into this novelty wave, pushing creativity to strange and often hilarious limits. Candy eyeballs with gooey centers, gummy brains in individually sealed lab sample bags, wax fangs filled with syrupy red blood, and even chocolate bars shaped like coffins or tombstones became October staples. Nestle and Hershey's weren't content with just wrapping things in orange foil. They were releasing limited edition spooky-shaped candies with collectible packaging. Meanwhile, over in the novelty shops of Hollywood Boulevard and Melrose Avenue, bins were filled with obscure imports and nostalgic oddities. Molasses chews so tough they could crack your molars, fruit taffies with century-old branding, and wafer candies with packaging that looked like it had been designed in a fever dream, often featuring off-brand monsters, bats with mustaches, or gothic fonts that made everything seem vaguely European. Some of these treats were rumored to come from Canada, though no one really knew where or how they ended up in SoCal shops. Flavors ranged from the classic to the head-scratchingly specific, Neapolitan in taffy form, sour cinnamon apple pie, blueberry soda fizz, and yes, even the elusive pumpkin spice taffy, which appeared in stores a full decade before pumpkin spice became a lifestyle. Amid the chaos and marketing blitz, certain classics held firm. Reese's peanut butter cups remained untouchable, the golden standard of Halloween. Kids who scored the rare full-size version were treated like royalty at school the next day. Fun Dip stayed in the game, too, providing a dependable hit of powdered sugar that doubled as a gateway to hyperactivity. Hershey bars, despite lacking bells and whistles, continued to ride the strength of their simplicity. Proof that sometimes you just want a square of chocolate that doesn't try too hard. But the true spirit of West Coast Halloween candy in the 1990s wasn't just about what you got, it was about what it meant. The real value of a candy haul was measured in trades, alliances, betrayals, and triumphant last-minute swaps. A blue raspberry fruity could be flipped for 2 starbursts under the right conditions. A full-size Butterfinger could buy you a favor that lasted until Thanksgiving. The best treats weren't always the tastiest. They were the ones that made your friends jealous or gave you bargaining power. It was playground economics in its purest form. Looking back, Halloween candy in the 1990s wasn't just a seasonal sugar rush. It was a snapshot of a decade defined by experimentation, excess, and a deep need to stand out. It was a time when candy companies took wild risks and kids rewarded them with sticky fingers and gleeful chaos. On the West Coast especially, where trends often started and spread, Halloween was a moment of creative anarchy. From the surf towns of Southern California to the foggy neighborhoods of the Bay Area, kids hit the streets with pillowcases and plastic pumpkins, hunting for more than just sugar. They were chasing status, weirdness, and that one weird candy no one else had ever heard of. In the end, West Coast Halloween in the 90s wasn't just about eating candy. It was about collecting it, judging it, ranking it, weaponizing it in trades, or hiding it from siblings. It was social currency and edible nostalgia rolled into one glorious, chaotic night. Like everything else from that decade, it was messy, full of personality, and more fun than it had any right to be.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199X, we're here just for you, for you.